Assalamu alaikum, dear students. How are you? Hope you are well. I will, by the grace of Almighty Allah. Today, I like to take class on Bangladesh and Global Studies for class 9, chapter 3, lesson 3.4, topic the ebb and flow. After the end of the lesson, you will be able to explain the concept of ebb and flow, the causes of ebb and flow, and classification of ebb and flow. You will also be able to explain the effects of ebb and flow on Earth. Now, concept of ebb and flow. What is ebb and flow? The sun and the moon continuously attract the surface of the earth. The water of the earth's surface gets ascended because of such attraction at a site and gets descended elsewhere at intervals of a particular duration. The seawater regularly ascends and descends in due course. Such inflation of seawater in a regular course is called flow or high tide, and the descending water is called ebb or low tide. So, dear students, what is ebb? Actually, due to the attraction of the sun and moon, the water of the sea and ocean in some places ascends and in some places descends. The rising water of the sea and ocean due to the attraction of the sun and moon is called flow or high tide, and the falling water is called ebb or low tide. The water at the middle sea generally ascends and descends within 1 to 3 feet only. As the depth of the seas and oceans at the coastal area is less, the mass water ascends and descends very high and low, even up to 12 feet. That is why the ebb and flow is observed few kilometers away from the estuary through the river's course. It is seen in Karnafuli River of Bangladesh. It is also seen in the Meghna and Podda rivers of Bangladesh. Now, reasons for ebb and flow. The scientists have proved that the ebb and flow occur in consequence of the centrifugal force generated due to the Earth's rotation and of attraction from the sun and moon over the Earth. In other words, tide is caused by gravitational force of the moon and sun as well as the centrifugal force of the Earth. Dear students, actually, ebb and flow occurs due to the attraction of the sun and moon over the surface of the earth. Here, moon is the main attractive power to cause a tide in the water bodies of the earth. Actually, there are two reasons for ebb and flow. One of them is gravitational force and other one is centrifugal force. First of all, gravitational force. Each substance of the earth has the power of attraction and one attract each other. This attraction is called gravitational force or gravity. The smaller thing moves around the larger thing. Due to gravity, the earth moves around the sun and the moon moves around the earth. The larger is the thing, the greater is the power of attraction. That is, the larger thing has the greater power of attraction, but when distance becomes far, the gravity becomes weak. The sun is large in size than the moon by 2.60 crore fold. That is, the sun is bigger than the moon by 26 million times. The sun is 15 crore kilometer away from the earth and the moon is only 38 lakh kilometer away. The sun is so outdistanced by the moon that the moon exercises double attractive power over the earth than the sun does. In fact, the moon's effect only about half of that of the moon's. Thus, the moon's gravity has a larger effect on the ebb and flow. So, tide is mainly generated by the attraction of the moon. Now, centrifugal force. The earth always rotates on its own axis from west to the east. As a result, a force is created which is called centrifugal force. Due to the centrifugal force, the liquid mass water wants to detach from the earth's surface. For this reason, the mass water gets ejected outside all the while and tends to become isolated from solid ground. So tide is also caused due to centrifugal force side by side gravitational force. Now, lunar day. A solar day is the time that the earth takes 24 hours to rotate on its own axis from west to east. Unlike solar day, a lunar day is 24 hours and 52 minutes. The lunar day is 52 minutes longer than a solar day because the moon revolves round the earth in the same direction, that is from west to east, side by side the earth's rotation. The ebb and flow directly related to lunar day. Dear students, point to be kept in mind that ebb and flow occur in a lunar day, that is in 24 hours and 52 minutes. Now the interval of ebb and flow. The moon is the only satellite of the earth. It revolves round the earth. The earth rotates upon its own axis from west to east. So the moon orbits round the sun from west to east. The moon moves round the earth on its own orbit in 27 days. That is, the moon moves 360-degree angular distance of the earth in 27 days. So in one day or 24 hours, the moon moves 13-degree angular distance of the earth. That is, if we divide 360 degree by 27 days, we can get 13 degree. As both the earth and moon rotate from west to east, the earth passes through the said 13 degree further in 52 minutes. In this way, a lunar day is calculated 24 hours and 52 minutes as the combination of Earth's 24 hours and the Moon's 52 minutes. So, a major tide originates at a certain site every after 4 hours and 52 minutes. When a major tide originates at a certain site, a minor tide also originates over there after 12 hours and 26 minutes. The sea water ascends and descends once after every 12 hours and 26 minutes. At every site, both ebb and flow successively occurs after every 6 hours and 13 minutes. Dear students, if flow occur, then after 6 hours and 13 minutes, ebb occurred in that place. If a major tide occur in a place, after 12 hours and 26 minutes, a minor tide originates that place. Now, classification of ebb and flow. The ebb and flow or tide may be divided into a few categories such as the major tide, the minor tide, the flood tide, and the neap tide. Flood tide originates on new moon lunar day and full moon lunar day. Neap tide occurs on 18th 8th lunar day and 21st lunar day. Now, major tide. The moon moves around the earth. During the rotation of the moon, the part of the earth that draws near the moon's attraction prevails mostly over there. Consequently, water arrives from the neighboring sides and gets ascended just below the moon, and tide originates. This tide is categorically called major tide or direct tide. A major tide is mainly caused by the moon's gravity. Dear students, have a look at the figure. A line is drawn through the moon from west to east, which is indicated with some arrows. Through this orbit, the moon revolves around the earth. Again, the blue color portion surrounding the earth indicates the water of the sea and ocean. In the figure, point A indicates major tide or flow, which is also called chief high tide. When major tide originates at point A, the minor tide originates at point B. Water flows out of the points C and D. The state of water existing at the points C and D is called the ebb. Dear students, in the figure you can see the sun, the moon and the earth. The part of the earth that just below the moon, major tide originates there due to the gravity of the moon. Just opposite side of A place, the B marked place, minor tide originates due to the centrifugal force of the earth. Now, minor tide. To the opposite of the major tide, the land side below the water is firmly tied with the earth center, because of which an attraction of the moon over there remains equal in comparison with that of the center. Consequently, the land becomes more attracted towards the moon, and the water side of the opposite side, the centrifugal force is generated. Due to the centrifugal force, water from both sides flows towards the region and generates a tide. Such tide is called minor tide or indirect tide. We can say that minor tide is caused mainly by the centrifugal force. When a major tide originates at one side of the earth, a minor tide at other side, and water flows out of the middle between the two tides. The state of water existing at the middle is called the ebb. Dear learners, look at the figure again. Point A indicates major tide, whereas point B indicates the minor tide. The existing water at points C and D is called the ebb. The tide in point A is stronger than tide in point B. Dear learner, this is the figure relating to flood tide on a new moon lunar day. In the figure, you can see the sun, the moon and the earth. On a new moon lunar day, the moon and the sun stay at the same side of the earth. Consequently, on this lunar day, the sun and the moon stay at the prime vertical circle. In this day, the sun, earth and moon are in a straight line. As a result, the gravitational force of the sun and moon are pulling in the same direction, that is towards the earth. The rising force of water is at maximum due to the combined gravitational attraction of the sun and moon. Then a strong tide is generated, which is called flood tide or spring tide. Flood tide is also called prime tide. In this day, the high tide, that is flow, is higher, and low tide, that is ebb, is lower. Flood tide originates twice a month, on a new moon day and full moon day. Dear students, look at the figure. The moon is moving round the earth from west to east, which is indicated with arrow. The blue color portion which encircles the earth indicates water in the sea and ocean. The rise of water just below the moon is a little bit higher than the opposite side of the earth. Neap Tide or Ebb Tide on 8th lunar day. A week after the spring tide, on 8th lunar day, the sun's and the moon's gravities are not in the same line. Rather, the sun and the moon stay at a right angle of the earth. That is, the moon is at a right angle to the sun. On this first quarter lunar day, the moon has the greatest gravitational attraction on the oceans. However, the sun tries to attract the oceans towards it. That is, the sun decreases the force of the moon. Yet, tides originate towards the moon because of the moon's attraction. But the velocity or the speed of the tide is not get severity because of the sun's attraction at the same time. As a result, moderate tide originate on this day, which is smaller than usual tide. Such tide is called Neap Tide or Ebb Tide, which have a small tidal range. Neap Tide originates twice a month, on 8th lunar day and 21st lunar day. Dear learners, have a look at the figure again. Here the moon is just above the earth, while the sun is in a line with the earth. A right angle is created here. Moderate tide originates here. Flood tide or spring tide on the full moon day. 2 weeks later of new moon, we get a full moon. On full moon lunar day, the moons stay at one side of the earth, whereas the sun stay other side of the earth instead. The sun and the moon stay at prime vertical circle during this lunar day. In this day, the sun, earth and moon are in a straight line. The gravitational forces of the sun and moon are attracting along the same plane line. The rising force of water is at maximum due to the combined gravitational attraction of the sun and the moon. Then an extreme tide is caused, which is called flood tide or spring tide. It is also called prime tide. In this way, the high tide is higher and low tide is lower. Flood tides originate twice a month, on new moon day and full moon day. Dear learners, look at the figure. The moon and the sun stay both sides of the earth. These three bodies, that is sun, moon and earth, are arranged in a straight line. Due to the combined gravities of the sun and moon, the seas and oceans experience a strong tide. The rise of water just below the moon is a little bit higher than that of the opposite side of the earth. Now, Neap Tide or Ebb Tide on the first lunar day, on the 21st lunar day. A week later, we can get moon's last quarter. The sun and the moon stay at a right angle of the earth on the 21st lunar day like the 8th lunar day. On this last quarter lunar day, the tides originate towards the moon because of its attraction. But the speed of the tide does not get severity because of the sun's attraction at the same time. Such tide is called neap tide or ebb tide. Here, tide, high tide or flow is not so high. Neap tide originates twice a month on 8th and 21st lunar days. Dear student, look at the figure. Among the sun, moon and earth, a right angle is created. The moon attracts over the earth while the sun distracts the attraction. As a result, a moderate tide originates, which is called neap tide or ebb tide. Dear student, last of all, the influence or impact of flow and ebb on the earth's or human life or our economy. The tide has an influence directly or indirectly on the earth or the ground surface, the mass water and economic activities of human beings. The influence of tide on the earth are of two types, such as positive impact and negative impact. Positive impact. Point 1. Cleans water. Due to flow and ebb twice a day, the sweeping in the water gets cleansed and its water becomes free of dirt due to tide, silt gather at the river channel and river mouths. As a result, the river mouth remains open. Point 2. Water irrigation. The river pits become deeper due to ebb and flow. The water of tide is kept confined by cutting canals beside the river for irrigation. Point 3. Hydroelectricity project. Hydroelectricity is generated a lots of rivers in the world by utilizing the tide. For example, Lawrence power plant in France and a hydroelectricity center at Bandola port in India are two examples of hydroelectricity which is generated by tide. Point 4. River port free of ice. As salty water inundates the interior side of the country by the ebb and flow, the river water movement remains favorable in the cold countries. Point 5. Facility for port. Facility for port. Due to flow, the water increases in the river. As a result, big ships, water vessels can easily enter the river from the ocean, and again they can go back to the ocean with the ebb. In Bangladesh, while the depth of river extends at the Chittagong and Mongla port during tide, big vessels, big ships can easily enter the port or leave the port. The vessels, ships, etc. anchor at the river channel before entry to the port waiting for tide. The tide from Bay of Bengal reaches near Gualando river at Podda and Bhairav Bazar at the Meghna river. Last of all, production of salt. Point 5, production of salt. Salt is made with the seawater keeping confined through drying process. Negative impact. Besides a lot of positive impact, the tide has also a negative impact. Tidal bore and loss. The seawater largely enters the land side, passing through the river channel during the spring tide with a strong wave and cause tidal bore. Tidal bore holds the height of 3 to 4 feet up to about 40 feet. There originates a strong tidal bore in the rivers whose estuaries are narrow or facing sand damp in their front. In Bangladesh, strong tidal bore usually takes place in the new moon tide, that is spring tide, during the rainy season, but its velocity gets decreased after entering into the land surface. The Meghna, the Bhagirathi of India, the Amazon of Brazil, etc. rivers become usually succumbed with excessive tidal bore. Boats, steamers, ships, etc. submerge due to the tidal bore from time to time. Dear students, I liked no more today. Stay home, stay safe, study regularly. Pray for me, I will pray for you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.